All right, then let's get started with all the commodities that we are tracking today. First up, let's talk about gold and copper, which are in focus, each telling a different story, one of safe haven demand and the other of industrial strength. Now, gold, it's hovering around that $3,400 per ounce level. That's down about 0.2% today. That's after hitting a 5-week high yesterday. Now, despite this dip, it's up 25% on a year-to-date basis and on its longest monthly winning streak since 1973. Now, what are the drivers there? Persistent central bank buying, unresolved US trade tensions, and fiscal uncertainty. Add in rising ETF inflows and possible Fed rate cuts, and the dollar continues to weaken. These are all the factors that are lifting gold's appeal. Copper, meanwhile, went to that $9,885 per ton level. That's up about 1% yesterday and nearly 13% on a year-to-date basis. Now, these prices spiked on rising Chinese demand, with refined copper imports surging 15% in June. Also, scrap metal shipments from the US to China, they have plunged to a 21-year low that's tightening supply. Chinese smelters, they face low processing fees and uncertainty around US tariffs, and that's adding more fuel to the volatility there. So whether it's gold, safe haven shine, or copper's industrial pulse, both metals are firmly in the spotlight today. But which are the other metals and other commodities that are in focus? To take us through that, Ravinder is now joining us to give up a roundup of the commodities in focus today.
Well, yes, palm oil and crude oil, both the counter is in focus. If we talk about palm oil, then palm oil are rising and are expected to remain between 4,100 to 4,300 ringgit ton over the next month. And as per Malaysian Palm Oil Council, festive season from India and high US soybean oil prices are remain supportive factor. India palm oil imports from Malaysia are likely to stay strong in the Q3, which is driven by Diwali restocking and attractive prices. And high US soybean prices have made palm oil more competitive, boosting Malaysian export to India since April. If we talk about changes, then YTD changes, palm oil is down approx 9.5%, and MTD basis palm oil is up 5%. If we talk about crude oil, then crude oil fell by roughly $0.24 to around 68.97 per barrel, while US WTI dipped about $0.21 to $66.9 per barrel, and oil edges lower as trade concern increased worries about the fuel demand. And key catalyst to monitoring going forward is the looming August 1 tariff deadline, possible EU measures for tariff, and supply trend from OPEC plus producer. If we look about the stock crude oil movement. In YTD basis, crude oil is down more approx 8%, and MTD basis crude oil is up 2%.
All right, so that's crude oil and palm oil, both in focus today. But let's shift the spotlight back to copper, which is a very key industrial metal. Now, it did hit a 2-week high yesterday, but prices remain steady around those $9,600 and $9,800 per ton mark. However, volatility persists amid tariff threats and China's scrap shortage. In fact, BMI sees 2.9% annual production growth through 2034. We'll also talk about how China's 15% jump in demand and the risk from mine disruptions, and whether US tariff threats could reshape copper trade flows. To discuss this further, Sabreen Chaudhary, who's the head of commodities at BMI, is now joining us to unpack the outlook there. Hi, Mr. Chaudhary. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Chaudhary. Now, let's talk about the copper prices. So let's talk about the copper prices. Now, they have been steady around those $9,600 to $9,800 per ton level. In fact, they did touch that $9,885 level yesterday on LME. So now, if you could help us explain what is driving the stability amid the global tensions that are underway.
So the US announced tariffs, 50% tariffs on copper imports into the country earlier in the month. And due to that, there's been significant front loading of exports to the US. So US prices of copper on the COMEX have definitely outperformed prices on the LME, on the Shanghai Futures Exchange. But copper from the LME and from Shanghai Futures Exchange are being delivered to the US before the deadline in August. So due to this increased demand, especially after the announcement of tariffs, prices have gained significantly over the last couple of weeks. And this is also compounded by a slight weakening of the US dollar that has led to the increase in global metal prices overall.
That's right. So stockpiling is increasing in the US. But Sabrina, let's also talk about scrap metal shortage in China. How significant do you think it is currently, and what are the long-term impacts of this that it could have on the global supply chain?
So there is a significant shortage of scrap copper as well as copper ore copper concentrates in China. So treatment charges have gone into the negative territory over the last couple of weeks, and this has been a huge pressure on copper supply out of China lately. In the longer term, we do expect a little bit of this to ease, especially if the copper tariffs, US copper tariffs go into effect. Then there will be additional copper concentrate exports coming out of Chile that could ease the supply situation in China. This would be a welcome news to Chinese smelters that have doubled their capacity over the last 2 decades. So we do expect a slight easing of the supply situation in the coming few months.
All right, so that's about the supply situation. But Sabrina, let's also talk about pricing. You were just mentioning about, a tariff rollback that could be likely. So what are the signals that you're watching that could confirm this, and what's the price impact going to be if that happens?
So right now, we haven't heard of any exemptions or exceptions. However, the copper tariffs are mostly detrimental to US domestic manufacturers and construction companies. So as it is most harmful to the US itself, there are likely to be some exceptions and exemptions to this tariff rule. And in the event that US copper imports from Chile, from Canada, from Mexico, if they are maintained the way they were in the past couple of years, then we do expect the copper prices to ease slightly, especially prices on the COMEX.
That's right. So you do expect an easing if those tariffs are rolled out as and when they happen. But now, Sabrine, well, let's also talk about China particularly. Now, to what extent is this China's 15% month-on-month jump in refined copper imports in the month of June that we saw? Do you think it's structural or is it more seasonal?
So it is definitely a bit more seasonal, but at the same time, the Chinese economy has grown above expectations in the first half of the year, especially in Q2. So we have seen a slight increase in Chinese industrial activity, although PMI remains in contraction over the last couple of months. There has been a slight, positive sentiment towards activity in China as well, and this has led to increased copper imports as well as overall increase in metals demand over the last couple of weeks. Even though this might slow in the next couple of months, the demand situation in China has seemingly improved a little bit.
All right. So you are saying that the demand situation might ease out a little bit, going forward in the coming months. But would that still hold true, given that massive dam project that has, started in Tibet?
Yep, so the hydropower project definitely is a boost to metals demand. We have seen quite a lot of rise in ferrous metal prices, especially those that are used in construction, so iron ore, steel, also zinc prices because of its use in the galvanizing of steel. And this is mainly due to the $170 billion hydropower project in the Tibetan Plateau. However, that is one project. The Chinese property sector still remains in the doldrums. The Chinese PMI remains in contraction. Global growth is set to slow due to the impact of tariff uncertainty, and this would have an impact on mainland China's exports as well. So going forward, the growth for mainland China is set to weaken slightly compared to the first half of the year, and this will have an impact on global metals demand.
All right. Thank you so much, Sabrine, for joining us today. Like you said, we could see a slight bit of slowdown in mainland China, and that is likely to have an impact in the metal space. But thank you so much for taking us through all the factors that are driving the price hike in copper. Thank you so much.
Thank you.